Okay, so hello everyone. This is a new series of webinars that we've pulled together entitled Getting a Product Unstuck in 90 Days. We have a hashtag around it, which is hashtag 90day Agile, obviously all one word, if you're familiar with the Twitterverse. The way we're going to structure it is talk about a roadmap of things you can do. There's not a specific order. There's no predependencies on finishing one piece before starting the next. But we're going to talk about it in the sort of order that, in our experience, it happens. So today's session is going to be about mainly what not to do and how to untie your hands so that you're doing things as effectively and efficiently as possible. And then following on from that, in the forthcoming webinars, we'll talk about getting the project structured correctly and getting your stakeholders aligned with what the project's trying to deliver so that you then talking about getting your team aligned with that direction and working as effectively as they can, things like empowering them and making sure that you remove the blockers. Then we talk about getting the code base in a position that you can more quickly develop on and change your both pace and direction because you're working on a stable code base. After that, we're going to talk about getting it into production and trying as soon as possible to hit the big risks about getting a piece of software into production, getting it in as soon as you can, not waiting till to end. And then we're going to talk about some of the softer things around the organization that bring the process of starting to put stuff into development and into production faster and faster. So information radiators, visualizing the solution, and all the things that you can do about continually improving the team's velocity. So today is about what not to do and about putting yourself in the best position to start, getting onto the front foot. In stakeholders and project portfolio stuff, the team that's actually going to be delivering it, the code base that it's going to deliver onto, production and implementation and addressing those risks, and then continual improvement. So, without further ado, we're going to start. We should be going for about till about 4:30. If you need to leave early, that's okay. If you want to ask any questions, just pop it into the chat box, and we should have a couple of minutes at the end to talk about that. So I'm just going to yabber on for a bit and give you my opinion. It is just my opinion. We have done this with several programs of different sizes. The longest one is probably 70 program, hundreds of millions of pounds, 450 external people working for those 7 years. Hundreds of millions of records being migrated and billions of pounds turned through the system. And that's probably the largest one. We have done others. So I think the most important thing is to try and, so the scenario is, obviously, let's set the context. The scenario is you've got a product, a portfolio of products that aren't going as fast as you'd like them to go, and you would like to inject some momentum into your team. You might have a deadline that can't be shifted and no way the team's going to hit it. You might be burning a lot of money on a portfolio of projects and not be making any progress in any of them. You might find that the teams think they're going as fast as they can, but there's always more change to do, and you might find that your systems are becoming unstable, because you're introducing change too fast. You might find that the pendulum swung the other way, and your infrastructure and operations and change teams have locked down the platform, so you can't get change in because of all the change requests, because you've started breaking stuff in production, and they've shied away from letting the team make change. So that's the context. And the first thing to do is, I believe, is to put your cards on the table and understand across the board exactly where you are, and be transparent with everyone that this is where you've got to start from, and you're in trouble and you need to start making some changes. There's a great quote from, I think it was from Denning, who said, the organization's perfectly structured to deliver what it's currently delivering. So obviously, if you don't change anything, nothing's going to change. And this is about making the right changes, not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but just making changes so that week by week, your project starts delivering with speed and everyone feels in a much more comfortable position. I think the other important thing to say, as well as transparency, is that Agile projects normally go from red to amber to green, whereas traditional projects tend to stay green until you're at the point where you can't possibly change anything, and then they quickly go amber and red and stay red and overrun. So if you are using Agile, the fact that before you getting towards your deadline, your project is red shouldn't be a problem, as long as you can start seeing it moving towards amber. So the idea of Agile is to look at all your risks, whether they are business risks or technical risks, team risks, financial risk, but look at all your risks and address the highest one first and start reducing those risks one at a time, so that you bring your program into a more stable way of just constantly delivering good things into production, and then you can start focusing on speeding it up. So what not to do? There is a theory held by project managers that there's the triangle between scope, time, and money, and those are the three things that you want to try and lock down. If you lock those down, the more advanced thinking says that the thing that gets affected is quality. But there is another dimension that needs to be considered, and that is the process that you're using to deliver stuff. So what you really want to do is try and get your teams structured in a way that they are more efficient. You want to imagine your teams, the development teams, as being an efficient sausage machine, and your functional requirements, your stories, your features coming into that sausage machine, and as quickly as possible, one by one, being produced as sausages or working bits of functionality in production. So the things that we're going to look over, the things that we're going to discuss over the series, is trying to make that sausage machine as efficient as possible. So the time between putting some features in and producing working software is as short as possible, and then fattening the pipe so that the more features that go in, the more value is delivered at the end. And so you want to measure those two things. You want to measure feature coming into feature being ready for production, and then the volume of value going through. So what not to do is, the number one thing not to do is throw more developers at the problem. And the very simple reason for this is that generally in these programs of work, it's about communication, not about speed of typing. And you want to try and get your teams aligned and thinking as efficiently as possible, not writing code, tapping on keys as quickly as possible. So if you imagine your team as having lines of communication between them, If you have one member in the team, there's no lines of communication. Two members of the teams, there's one line between them. Three members, there are 3 lines of communication between them. 4 members, there are 6 lines of communication. 5 members, there are 10 lines of communication, etc. So the number of lines of communication increases dramatically, exponentially, as you add team members, because each new team member has to communicate with everyone else in the team. So throwing team members at the problem is not helping at all. The other way of thinking about it is your flow into production, your production pipeline from feature through requirement gathering, development, test, productionizing, putting into production, is similar to the flow of traffic on a motorway. And as you start adding features to that motorway, as you start adding cars to the motorway, what happens is the average speed starts dropping. So when the motorway is at about 70% capacity, and there's a direct analogy to when your development teams are at about 70% capacity, they are going as fast as they can. As you start adding more and more work into that pipeline, then the team starts moving slower and slower. So what you might find is that you've got too many bits of work in all at the same time. So one of the things to do is not to increase the size of the team. And the other thing to do is to reduce the amount of work in progress that the team is working on at the moment, and just get them to deliver a very, very small handful of things to start getting used to delivering stuff. So 2 key things: not increase the size of the team and not shove more work in to the front of the process, because all you're doing is clogging up the inner workings of the process. One thing about software development is it's very difficult to see that inventory of work in progress. So ideally, try and stop as much as you can and just let the team settle in and get into a rhythm and start developing stuff. The other topic I want to talk about is untying both your hands. It came from a quote from a workshop I was doing the other day with a large program of work, and one of the ladies was asking if offshore development will work. And the response is, of course it will work, but you do things that tie your hands behind your back. And if the program of work you're working on is that important, and you want to keep going, you want to try and make it a success, and it's really valuable to do for the business, then you shouldn't be doing things like not giving developers access to the tools they need, making meeting rooms difficult to book, making the network slow and sluggish, not allowing developers to have full access to the internet, making the walls unavailable. I worked in a building where the maintenance people came in every evening and took everything down off the walls. Totally unhelpful. Making people context switch. So constantly having meetings that were nothing to do with the process that you were working on. Things like appraisals happening during the week, in the middle of the day, at random times. Having people work in one office and then need to walk across the road to go and have a meeting in another office, and then walk back across town, and things like that. Try and co-locate everyone if you can. Create some space where people just go every day and they're there to have the meetings. If you've got product owners that are doing a day job, locate them in with the team and get them to do their day job sitting with the team, so that the day job suffers slightly, but the team has full access to the product owners. Try and get a cadence going, a regular rhythm within the team, so that if you have to do appraisals, which is something you obviously have to do if you're in a large organization and you've got direct reports, then maybe set aside some time on, say, a Friday morning between 9 and 11 to do appraisals and line up all your appraisals for them, so that when you're not available to the team, it's at a fixed time every week and the team can plan around that. And you don't need to have this constant communication with everyone in the team about when the appraisal is and the fact that you've got to go to a meeting and so they need to reschedule a meeting, etc. So try and have a weekly or 2 weekly schedule for the whole team up on the wall that says on what day the planning game is and what meeting room it's in, and it's in the same meeting room every 2 weeks or every week, depending on how often you're sprinting, if you are sprinting. Have the show and tells at the same time every 2 weeks or every week. Have a retrospective at the same time every couple of weeks. Make sure the retrospective doesn't ramble on. Look at all the meetings that your team's doing, and if it's nothing to do with their current piece of work and the current story that they're working on, then either cancel the meeting or schedule it for a day of the week that doesn't disrupt the rest of the team not having that team member available. If you're going to have long-term planning sessions, time box them and realize that there's limited value in planning stuff months and months ahead, because things will definitely change as you go. And obviously the context of this is you're trying to unstick a very stuck project. So you want to try and move all those things out of the way and put yourself in a position that you really are in a position to start moving faster. Just have a look at all the things around you. A useful exercise to do is actually to get your team in a room and play the evil alien game. And the evil alien game goes something like this. You have been sent down to Earth into this organization to try and, as secretly as possible, disrupt the organization. You're there to pretend to be doing the best you can, but you're actually doing things to sabotage the organization from within. And you just get the team to think that they are this evil alien, sabotaging the team, and try and write down a whole lot of things just in 10-minute, 15-minute exercise, quietly on their own in a meeting room, all the things that they would do as the evil alien so that they can justify to management how they could sabotage the project from within. And you're looking for things like, well, what we want to do is we want to cancel all holidays and all leave, and we actually want to start working weekends because that'll increase our productivity by 40% if we work all weekends. And if we get everyone to work till 8 o'clock at night every night, then that'll also increase productivity. So we could increase it by another 50%. So we're probably looking at moving from a 40-hour week to an 80-hour week. That will be really productive, won't it? Because when we get everyone working 80 hours a week, then we'll have super productivity. That's an idea that an evil alien will do that's perfectly justifiable to your management team, that makes sense, but we all know is ludicrous. Another thing that you might consider is shutting out all natural light, because if people have natural light, then it obviously blinds them when they're trying to work and distracts them and makes them look out the windows. So as the evil alien, what we're going to suggest is shutting out all natural light. So do this exercise and then talk through the ideas the team will come up with. And what you'll find is when people are put in this role-playing kind of idea, things will emerge, little truths will emerge, exaggerated obviously. But you'll be able to look at that and get a really good idea of the sorts of things that are actually slowing down your organization. And start really looking at those and saying, are these things necessary? Is it really necessary to do a detailed timesheet every week that takes people an hour, hour and a half to do with a little description of what they've done every day? Is that useful? If you are employing the sorts of people that you feel you need to micromanage like that, then the other thing that you should do is take a long, hard look at your recruitment process and realize that the top quartile of developers are about 4 times as productive as the bottom quartile of developers. So if you feel your team is employing people in that bottom quartile, and bearing in mind the thing I mentioned about lines of communication, you can replace, and the top developers are only about twice as expensive as the bottom quartile. So top quartile, 4 times as productive, twice as expensive, and fewer lines of communication. So to get, say, 4 units of work done, you will need either 4 developers in the top quartile or 16 developers in the bottom quartile. And the 16 developers will cost you about double the 4 developers in the top quartile. And the lines of communication will be infinitely longer. I can't do the maths now, but it's something like 80 lines of communication versus 10 lines of communication. So smaller, more efficient, smarter people working as efficiently as they can without having their hands tied behind their backs by being made to do ludicrous things to satisfy the process police or the PMO or audit, things like that, that are just unhelpful in making progress. Because don't forget, the Agile Manifesto says the most useful thing is delivering working software, not documentation about what we are going to deliver if we ever get around to delivering it, not updated Gantt charts, not risk logs that constantly get audited and reviewed. You know, have a risk session, absolutely, but have a whole lot of post-its up on the wall of what your highest risks are and work on the top one to reduce it. And when you've reduced that risk to the point that it's not the highest one anymore, then don't carry on reducing that risk ad infinitum. Take the next risk, which is now the highest risk, and reduce that risk. So I feel I've listened to the sound of my own voice for quite a long time now. We're almost at past. Just wondered if there are any questions coming through. Yeah, anyone got any questions that they'd like to pose to me? I'm all ears. Nothing yet? Okay, I'll ramble on a little bit more. So just to repeat what the upcoming roadmap is, we've talked briefly, and there are a whole host of things that could be covered in this topic, but what not to do. 2 top things are not to knee-jerk increase the number of people in the team. If anything, reduce the number of people in the team, get a couple of smarter people in, get those top quartile developers in, and don't tie your hands behind your back. So don't do the ludicrous things that you know you do as an organization because you've always done it. You know, there's that story of you've got some monkeys in a cage with a ladder in the middle of the cage and some bananas at the top of the ladder. And the monkeys go up the ladder to get the bananas, and every time they do, you spray all the monkeys with ice cold water. And what the monkeys do is they realize they can't go up the ladder. And if one monkey goes up the ladder, all the other monkeys pull that monkey down. What you do one by one is you exchange the monkeys that have been sprayed with cold water by ones that haven't. And as the new monkey goes up the ladder, all the other monkeys will pull them down and they won't go up the ladder. Eventually, you will have a cage full of monkeys that have never been sprayed by cold water. They don't know why they're not going up the ladder. They just don't go up the ladder because people don't go up the ladder. Monkeys don't go up the ladder. And you've got to make sure that you haven't got yourself into a position that you're doing things because you've always done them, and that's the way they should be done. Remember that the organization is perfectly designed to deliver what it's currently delivering. So if you want to try and change what you're delivering, then you need to change the design of your organization, including how you prioritize work, how you manage your development team, the people that you have, the processes they're following, the freedoms that you give them or don't give them, to try and shift the organization to be a differently structured organization to start delivering stuff faster. And the other thing, which we'll come on to in more detail in the next seminar, webinar, is talking about not shoveling too much work in to a development team at any one time. So try and streamline that pipeline. So the next topic coming up is going to be about portfolio management and organizing stakeholders and getting the stakeholders all aligned so you're all pulling in the same direction. There's this concept of it's vector maths. So rather than having teams pulling in different directions and actually moving nowhere, try and get all the teams aligned so you're all pulling in the same direction. Even if you aren't pulling as hard in that direction, you will move in that direction because everyone's pulling in that direction. Does that make sense? I hope so. So thank you very much for joining us. We hope we'll see you in a couple of weeks' time. Graham will be tweeting and emailing out when the next webinar is. And sign up to our mailing list